Yo, peace. It's seed talk, stuff to make your seeds walk. Um, I'm on my one-on-one seed talks. I'm gonna start doing some one-on-ones, me and just special guests so we can vibe and whatnot. We got a very special guest coming on tonight. Been waiting to get this brother on for a minute. Um, Man, shout out to Carmelita for helping produce this show and whatnot. I'm gonna let some people get in the room right now. Pardon self, we're about 10 minutes, a little bit behind schedule, but we're just waiting for Khepra Ptah to get on. And we're gonna be talking about African spiritual systems. We're gonna be talking about voodoo, why people seem to think that voodoo is a form of devil worship, and so I think it's interesting to get someone who is a practitioner of the art, and let's bring him in right now. Khepra Ptah, welcome to the Sea Talk. You know what I'm saying? Welcome, brother.
It is my pleasure, good brother. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. It's been a minute. It was good. Just last time I saw you, we're doing a little bit of mourning, a little grieving. We had lost Jasmine X, a big pillar of our community and whatnot. So it was good to see you there. It wasn't necessarily a bad time. It wasn't a good time. It was a peaceful time. You know what I'm saying? Witnessing this transition. And I think that we're gonna start talking about that, in this episode of Seed Talk, why African traditions and spiritual systems are so important to the Black community. And I think making that transition from the living to the afterlife, you know what I'm saying? Because in a lot of spiritual systems, if not all of them, there's no such thing as death. There's just life and afterlife. I'm sure we're gonna get into that. His brother's a very deep brother. So Khepra Ptah, why don't you just break down your name? I got my story of how we met. Why don't you just, tell them how you got into African spiritual systems, voodoo, hoodoo, the netters, orishas. Let's get started, man. Like, how did you get started in studying and whatnot?
Wow. Well, I can literally say it's quite a long story. Well, one of the things is that, my father, he used to have altars. He used to have a lot of stuff mixed up on his altar, but he had a lot of Catholic influence. But the way he talked about his spiritual beliefs, it didn't really sound exactly like the way the church would do things, number one. Another thing is that he would tell me about my great-grandmother, and he would tell me things like, well, your great-great-grandmother, she was a voodoo priestess by night and a Catholic by day, a devout Catholic by day. So, I would have all these weird experiences when I was young. I couldn't really explain what they were. Of course, my mother, she did the best thing that she knew, and that was to send me to church. Perhaps I needed the Spirit of the Lord to come and, help me get through whatever I was going through. But I would go through a lot of things, like, for instance, sleep paralysis. I would see a lot of shadows. I would catch them out of the corner of my eye. Sometimes I catch them in my peripheral vision. So, I talked to my father about what was happening. And my father would say stuff like, well, it's in the blood,
In the blood.
And he had he told me about the spiritual being that he had called it his playmate. And he had also talked about spiritual entities that he had connected to through my great-grandmother, who had taught him a few things. He had explained that at times she would have like chicken bones, and she'd have these chicken bones painted with fingernail polish. But these chicken bones meant something, you see. And later on, I would discover that these bones were used for divination, and we'll get into what that is. Okay. So, all of the experiences I had, it caused me to go on this quest to figure out not just who I was, but why I was going through the things I was going through, as well as the nature of this reality. It caused me to take a journey, where I got deep into the church for a while. But my answers were not found there, because I would tell people about my experiences. And I wasn't really satisfied, because what I didn't understand is that, my spiritual experiences, people would talk as though I just was a young child seeking attention. So as time went on, I recall my father speaking of his journey into the Nation of Islam. So, in fact, he had named me Jamal because at one point in time he had been in the mosque. His name was Jamal X, despite the fact that he had been in all these other things.
And Jamal means beautiful one.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think it's Swahili, right?
You can find it in Swahili, but also Arabic as one of Allah's 99 attributes.
Got you. So some people in the Black community will call your father a quote unquote jack of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that this is just proof that the Black community brought a lot of their cultural instincts to America when they came, and we were very, very plural. I would say, very plural or pluralistic. We study many things.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? Like when I went back to Africa years ago, I haven't been back in about 15 years. When I made my first pilgrimage to Africa, to Ghana, my brother who was showing me around Somalia, he is a Muslim. He's a Sunni Muslim, but as we walked around the villages, he would still say, "Don't take pictures of people because they think that without their permission, because they think that you're putting a juju on them."
Yes.
So that goes down to, spiritual systems and whatnot. So he never abandoned what he learned in his, individual tribe. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, what would you call your father? He went from being a, like a Christian or a Catholic to Voodoo to the Nation of Islam. I mean, how would you describe it?
Well, I think I call my father a juju man. He just took from the various systems. Even when he had joined the nation, he had already been, connected with the voodoo, through grandmother. The thing about it is that probably like myself, he before me decided he was going to search and figure out what was going on with him. Because a lot of times he would speak on communication with angels and spirits. Sometimes these spirits were ancestors, you see. So, in Louisiana, for instance, I spoke with my uncle. He's not a Christian. He's actually a Buddhist, but he started out in the church. And I spoke to him about, seeing ancestors or those who had passed on. And to him and to the rest of the family down there, it wasn't really a big deal. That's like, oh, that's nothing, but that's no one but Aunt Betsy. That's how they just say, oh, okay. Well, that was, that's Big Bob, that's Aunt Betty.
Right.
So it wasn't really a big thing because, at that time, to the elders, they were kind of like used to it. To them, even going to church, it was a very spiritual thing, So when I went down to Louisiana to visit my family, right, they took me into this area, kind of like past the bayou into a small church, just like, to me, it was in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
But when we went inside the church, the quality of the spiritual energy was different from all the other churches that I went to. Now, if you're familiar with the tradition of the Orishas, right, they have what you call is the bembe. And you'll get like 3 drummers and they'll sit down, they'll play the drums, and they'll play the drums until the Orisha may come down, whoever they may have been doing the bembe for. Now, Orisha, for those who don't know, is a spiritual force, a force of nature, or a spiritual being in which each and every one of us are born with 2. We have a male and a female assigned to us by the supreme being in the Yoruba language, Olodumare, in the Fan language, Mawulisa. These beings, one is a male, one is a female, and based on who these particular Orishas or Voodoos are, it will determine your destiny and what you're supposed to be doing in life. These particular Orisha in which you are born with are meant to guide you. However, you find out who they are through the process of divination. So anyway, getting back to what I was experiencing out there in Louisiana, and this is like close to Franklin, the small country, a small town. that's not really too much discussed on the map or anything like that. But when you go there, it's like Little Africa.
Right.
When when I was in this church, the energy came down and everybody started catching the Holy Spirit at once. And it felt more like a bembe than anything else. And the bishop there, who turned out to have been my cousin, he himself went into trance and he began to prophesy to the people and tell them about things that were happening in their life with pristine accuracy. He told my auntie that she was a prophet of Christ. But when he got to me, I noticed something very interesting. And that is, he didn't mention Jesus. But he told me that one of my jobs had something to do with helping to guide the people into a great light. That I will never forget.
But okay, so you got this message from your relative, from
Mhm.
your elder, that you were meant to be put on this path. So that pretty much gave you a signal. Now you said that you were supposed to be on this path to be a priest, to study the African spiritual systems, to hold close to this idea of voodoo. You said a lot, man. You said a lot. You were talking to a lot of people on the outside. You're talking about ghosts and spirits.
Hmm.
We're taught through Hollywood and through a lot of Christian folklore and whatnot, and just word of mouth, that we shouldn't be believing in ghosts, and ghosts is that devil stuff, and that's just not good. I mean, you're trying to tell us that you were seeing spirits and ghosts?
Yeah, indeed. And the thing about it, I'm not here to disrespect anyone, as far as what they may believe in. But we also got to keep in mind that the African systems looked at things somewhat differently. So they believe in the supreme being, but the difference is it's almost similar to the concept of Jesus if you think about it. And that is, the Christian church doesn't believe that you can approach God directly, but you have to go through the Son to get to the Father. But in the West African traditions, like for instance, the Yoruba, Olodumare, which is the supreme being in the Yoruba tradition, says that you know me through my orishas.
Right.
So what is taught and understood is that the supreme being is such a vast entity that you do not deal with the supreme being directly, and the supreme being is too occupied creating universes and basically doing what the supreme being does to directly meddle in human affairs. So therefore the supreme being works through other agents.
You have to have mediums.
Correct.
Is it
Mm-hmm.
the same thing in Kemet, when they talk about netters? Is it the same thing or similar? Is orishas like netters? Is it like spirits?
I'd say the netters are to the Egyptians or the Cometians what the Orishas are to the Yoruba. You see, now there is a supreme being called Ra Neberteshera or Neberteshera, which means the Lord of the universe or the Lord of the limit. You see, and this being breaks down into Amun Ra Ptah, right? And then there's the netters that emanate from these beings as well. So there's different theologies. Just like among the Yoruba, different regions had different orishas who were considered to be supreme, the most necessary in that region. Well, so did ancient Kemet, you see. So you can communicate with the Netaru, and it is my belief that the word netter is where the word nature comes from because of the fact of the Roman occupation. And a lot of Kemetic words can actually be found, transcribed into the Latin language because they had occupied that area. So, of course, they had taken on a lot of the Cometian language as well, a lot of Kemetic words.
I got to be real with you, though. Okay, so I've studied a lot, and I've studied under you. I used to come to the Sunday sessions, and so I bear witness to African spiritual systems, Voodoo, Ifa, Santanera, all that. I bear witness to all that. I also studied the Nation of Gods and Nerves. I've studied the Nation of Islam. I've studied Sunni. I've studied Buddhism. I've studied Judaism. I've studied all their, the Abrahamic, religions. And I can tell you, in all my studies, I've never seen no spirits, man.
Mm.
Brother, I've never, and the only time I've said I've seen some kind of spirit remotely is when I was experiencing dream paralysis, where I was really just resting in my subconscious, and then I woke up and nothing was there. And I will say this, if I ever did see a spirit, it wouldn't be no Casper the Friendly Ghost or a ghost experience. It wouldn't be anything that would scare me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But how do you explain a person like me who considers themselves an incredibly spiritual person? I just don't bear witness. But I'm not going to disrespect anyone who does. If you said you saw it, and Brother Jasmine was one of the main brothers who said he saw all kinds of things. Brother Jasmine said he saw the mothership one day, several times. And I was like, okay, brother, I've never seen that. And I'm just listening to you. I've never seen no spirits. How do you explain that, Khepra?
Well, different people have certain sense faculties developed in certain ways. You see, some people, they have the sense, right? Clairvoyance or clairaudience or clairsentience. Some people have the ability to see beyond. Some have the ability to hear beyond, or some have the ability to feel beyond. Like, for instance, in certain practices like the martial arts, when you develop your intuitive faculty to the point that you don't have to turn around and see the person, but you can feel when someone is watching, or you can feel when somebody is sneaking up on you. These are senses that are developed. Now, some people have these things developed at birth, but at the same time, when you get into Ifa or Fa, which is the Voodoo equivalent to Ifa, right? You will understand that everybody has their own Odu, or their own gifts that come with their particular incarnation. Like, for instance, when you speak about sleep paralysis. Now, a lot of times when people experience sleep paralysis, they will discover something interesting. They cannot move their body, but they can see everything around them, even though they cannot move their head.
Yeah. But that's in my subconscious, though. That's not. So break it down. I mean, I'm not hating. What you basically told me is I ain't got the gift, man. That's what you did. You a cold brother, man. Kevin just told me, hey man, you just ain't got it, bro. If you I ain't opened up this, I ain't opened up that shop yet. It ain't moved up the Kundalini yet, bro.
But you do have your own gift, though, and you do mention the sleep paralysis. There's something to that, right?
Okay.
Now, here's the thing. Now, this gets into the metaphysical. This is a place that a lot of people may not want to look into because it goes beyond the intellectual understanding of things. But you have more than one body, right? So when you are sleeping, when you're laying down and you can't move your body, your physical body can't move. Your astral body can move. It is the astral body that's active, not the physical. What you do next time that happens is you relax, let yourself go to sleep, and what you'll discover is that you will be able to move into another realm, or even move beyond your body and see around yourself or transport yourself into another place in your house. Why? Because your consciousness at that point can be projected outward and expanded from where your body is.
But the astral plane isn't what's real, though, is it?
A lot of things that affect us are affecting us on an astral level. So this may appear to be solid, but it's not necessarily as solid as we think it is, because every atom, even though everything is held together, even you are held together with 1,500 pounds, 15,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. Within every atom and between every atom is empty space. So everything appears to be solid when it's not really all that solid. Even the concept of time. A lot of times when you have a dream, that dream will be very real to you when you're in that particular state. But that dream may appear to have been an hour, a day, and some people report a couple of days. It's like the dream appeared to have been more than a day long, but your average dream is only 3 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that concept. I understand your concept that because I've been dreaming a lot lately, and the more and more I get older, brother, I will admit the more and more I'm gaining an intimate relationship with my dreams. Like I look forward to dreaming because it's heightening my awareness, but I haven't figured out how to make that supreme connection of like, okay, how do I interpret this dream to maybe forecast what's going to happen or something like that? But I know the opportunity is there. Like I had a dream the other night that I was getting into a conflict with one of my students, and I went to lash out and in self-defense and attack the student, and I woke up. But I woke up to something going on inside my house. You see what I'm saying? So I can't, I mean, we can say it's just a correlation. We can say, oh, that's not causation. They weren't linked. We can just say that was a coincidence, you know what I'm saying? Or something that just coincide. But I think it was my awareness.
Yes.
Even if it's as simple as I had a heightened awareness when I was resting that something was going on in the physical realm that connected to me in the subconscious realm and said, wake up. Something's going on in your Mecca, in your home. I don't go too more deeper than that because I'm dwelling right now in this physical, realm, dealing with this first, and I'm a very spiritual person, but I try to stay away from a lot of talk that's going to get our people away. And then so they're calling it a spooky science.
I understand.
You understand what I'm saying? I feel like it, and let's just jump into that real quick. Because I want you to define it all, but I want you. The first time I met you, Khepra, let's get into it, man.
Okay.
The first time I met you, I think it was on the 4. It was some bus that goes in front of Bryant Manor, and the bus that goes in front of, or used to go in front of Bryant Manor in Langston Hughes. I think we were either getting on or getting off there. And I was coming from the West. I was coming from West Seattle. You gave me a book or showed me a book called Behold the Pale Horse.
Yes.
By William Cooper.
Right.
You start saying all this stuff. And I'm always got an open door. Even though I let some things in my open door later on in life, I might kick it out. I never kicked out what you gave me. I went and got that book sooner or later because you were telling me that AIDS was made in a lab. And that hit me deep because my uncle at the time had HIV, had AIDS. And I was like, oh, this is made in the lab. And I was like, nah, man, there's no way. He said, nah, man. This guy who was in Navy intelligence stole all these files. And then talks about New World Order, it talks about secret society, it talks about Illuminati, it talks about this, it talks about the world economy, the Trilateral Commission. I was like, oh, come on, man.
Yes.
And you would have lost me. You would have lost me if I wasn't thirsty for the knowledge. And you would have lost me if you wasn't such a damn good rapper. Because you always had a nice spit on you, and it was good. It was a great marketing tool because I say he must know something because the brother's rhythm is on Pizzoin. So I just kept studying, and I would see you around town, and you were part of that group that you, Wayman, and B. Asia was in, and I think there were some other members too called 360.
Correct.
And y'all was spreading this, but my thing is how do we not lose our people? Like, how many times have you lost your people and they don't want to deal with you because they're like, oh man, don't mess with Copper Top. See, I put your other name out there too.
Right.
Yeah. Don't mess with don't mess with Copper Top because he be on that spooky stuff. He's talking about he's seeing ghosts, and he told me that if I masturbate too much, then I'm losing my intelligence because there's DNA. Hey,
Well,
Khepra, you was going around town saying some really deep stuff, man.
mhm. Yeah,
So how do
yeah.
you not lose your people, but still draw attention to the power within in voodoo? And then I want you, and then after you answer that, I want you to go in. What is the difference between all the different things? Because a lot of people be calling this devil worship. A lot
Mm,
of our brothers and sisters who study Judaism,
mm,
Christianity, and Islam, they be like, man, that's some devil worship stuff, man. Like,
yes.
that's not cool. That's the occult. That's paganism. And we're gonna get into that. But how do you not lose people when talking about this? Because it's pretty deep stuff, and we're not used to dependent on the force and the spirit within us. We're used to depending on the outside source to do all the work.
This is true. Well, one of the things I do, in fact, 360, the reason why it was 360 is because it was meant to engage the whole person, you see?
Right.
So it's kind of like, okay, if I can't hit you spiritually, I'll hit you intellectually, you know? And also, there are things taking place around us in the society in which we are a part of. Now, one of the things I did at the time is I brought awareness to what was happening in the physical world, you see? And I showed them from the ground up. First, you have to understand and acknowledge what's going in the physical world, because you may not have been initiated into spirit by spirit as of yet, or you may have and just not know it yet. So I would show people and talk to people about the symbolism in the dollar bill. And I also explained how the secret societies, as we call them, also work with esoteric knowledge, aka the occult, aka hidden knowledge. But this knowledge that is people consider to be hidden is actually a part of every religion. Every religion has its exoteric and its esoteric traditions. There's that for the knowers, and there's that which is preserved. There's that preserved for the knowers, and that which is distributed to the believers, or should I say, the faithful. So if I figure that I'm speaking to a person who may be more of a faith-based person, then I'll work on speaking the language that I'm familiar with, you know, when it comes to their particular tradition, or that they're familiar with when it comes to their particular tradition.
You use that as a baseline, use that as a starting point, and you're able, based on your teachings, to draw them back to whatever they're studying. You're able to
Most
do that.
definitely. Most definitely, because you see,
Okay, so okay, sorry. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to make sure that people are following this. So if I came to you and I said I was a Christian, you would be able to tell me how Christianity is directly tied to the Fan or the Voodoo or Santanera or Lecumi, Ifa, all that. You be able to tell me that.
I'll be able to show you where it connects, but I'll also be able to show you where it diverges.
Okay, then do it then. Do it. So I come to you and I'm a Christian because I'm gonna do it with Islam too. And I want to see you do it with Islam. Because I can do it with because I can do it with Christianity and I can do it with Judaism. But it gets a little more difficult to I can do it with Islam too, but it gets a little bit more difficult because they ain't really dealing with none of that stuff, man. They it's they shut a lot of that stuff down. The Arab colonialism was pretty hardcore, and we got to understand that they enslaved us before the Europeans. The sub-Saharan slave trade came before the transatlantic.
Mm-hmm.
So I come to you as a Christian and I say, well, go ahead, man. You guys over there sacrificing chickens, drinking blood. You guys are over there doing all this stuff, you know, zombies, raising people from the dead, you know what I'm saying? All this stuff. Break it down.
Well, did not Lazarus, you know, they rose, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Jesus himself raised from the dead. Abraham was about to sacrifice his son, you know, and they also have the animal sacrifice all up in the Old Testament. Jesus represented the lamb. So you do not have, according to the Christian tradition, they teach that he was the lamb that was slain because he represented the lamb, you know, that was slain back in the day to atone for one's sins. And according to Catholic tradition, which all of your Christian traditions in the West derive from, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, there's the concept of transubstantiation. When you believe that you can drink the blood of Jesus and eat the flesh of Jesus in the form of the wine and the bread, and that this literally transforms into his flesh and blood inside of your system. So that's there. Jesus Christ is also a human sacrifice that people have been learned, taught to worship. Again, I mean no disrespect, but I just want people to look at what we were taught from an early age in these traditions to see these traditions as the one and only true way, and to not talk to anybody else outside of these traditions. And you were scared by being told that if you dare question the Lord or question these teachings, it can send you to hell where you'll burn forever and you'll be at the mercy of the devil, who's also burning forever. So Christianity teaches you to not acknowledge a familiar spirit or the ancestors, but at the same time, they always have you acknowledging the Jewish ancestors, like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And if you was into the Judaic tradition and they read the Torah, they are reading the Torah and they're reciting the Torah, but they're acknowledging these prophets as ancestors. When you get into Jesus, when you get into the book of Matthew, you know, the first chapter, you're reciting Jesus's lineage. You see? So the recital of a lineage and everything else, all that is there. The remembering of the lineage. Working with ancestors when it comes to West African tradition is important. Also, even in Kemet, everywhere in Africa where you have an indigenous practice, they always acknowledge their ancestors, but it was not so much as the worship as people have been led to believe, but it was remembering and veneration, because these ancestors are within you and you're a continuation of your ancestors. So you're speaking to that part of you that goes all the way back to the beginning of manifestation or creation, or should I say the Big Bang.
Okay. I knew you was going to go with the sacrifice. It always gets me when people be like, those people are doing, they're worshiping the devil. And what's interesting in African spiritual systems, you know what I'm saying, like Ifa and Voodoo, there is no such thing as the devil.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? So you know, you're over here, you're sacrificing stuff to the devil, and you're doing devil worship. And I mean, but a chicken, y'all sacrificed the whole human being to start y'all religion.
Yeah.
Indeed. It's like a normal, you know, thief and robber that were on each side of him. So if I'm a Muslim and I study Islam, how do you draw Islam back to African spiritual systems or voodoo even?
Well, you know, again, it goes to ancestral veneration, right? Do you not have to acknowledge the prophets? But they say that the prophets are related. So you have to acknowledge a bloodline. Now, this is their words. They say there's 124,000 prophets in Islam, and that there's an ancestral lineage that these prophets are somehow related. So you're acknowledging the Prophet Muhammad, who was a human being. This is according to Islam. But you cannot acknowledge Allah without acknowledging the Prophet Muhammad, because you have to, in order to become a part of the religion, you have to say La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah, which means you bear witness that there's only one God, and Muhammad is his messenger. But you can't have Islam, you can't practice Islam without acknowledging the Prophet Muhammad. You have to acknowledge his books, you have to acknowledge his messengers, you have to acknowledge his angels, and his, you see what I mean? His books and prophets. So you have to acknowledge human beings, as well as angelic forces. Now, the question is, you understand that these beings exist, right? But when you look into Islamic tradition and you learn about the angels, you'll see that they're basically the same, or, you know, different pronunciations of the Hebrew angels. And you discover that these angelic forces started out as Canaanite deities. They're called angels, El and Elohim, Mikael or Michael in the Islamic tradition.
Isn't El the Hebrew for God or of God?
Indeed. So you have like El and you have Elohim, El and Elo, male and female, him, and that's the plurality. But the equivalent in Islam to Elohim is Allahua. See? So I see that there's someone asking about the difference between voodoo, hoodoo, paganism, Ifa, witchcraft, the occult, and African spiritual systems.
I put that up as a banner. Yeah. That's what I wanted to transition. Like, what's the difference? Because a lot of people, you hear a lot of people using them interchangeably. Like hoodoo, voodoo, paganism, Ifa, witchcraft. Let's get into what's the difference between like voodoo, hoodoo, and like Ifa. Like, those three? Like, what's the difference between those three?
Good question.
Voodoo and Ifa.
Well, first of all, there's been a lot of misunderstanding about hoodoo, right? And I want to call that up because a lot of people just take that and think they can do whatever they want with it and not respect the source from which it comes from. The hoodoo tradition comes out of the Congo. It's Congo. At one point in time, they had Nkisi and mojo bags and everything else. That's moyo, which is the spiritual power. It also could be sexual potency. But this spiritual power is something that is transferred into an object. They call African spiritual tradition animism. What it is that you're bringing an animating force into a non-living object, and you're taking the spiritual entity and you're spiritualizing that particular aspect. It could be a bottle, it could be an object, and you're transferring spiritual energy into that particular object. You can feed this object, and this object will begin to house an energy that others consider a spirit.
That's a little bit too much, Khepra, for him, bro.
Right.
Is that the reason why a lot of people like have a mantle or what you call a shrine in their homes where there's different foods and they feed different orishas and different spirits, different foods with different colors to initiate different energies and whatnot?
Indeed. But if you look at this, it's very similar to even your Western occult traditions, because they understand if you're trying to attract a certain energy towards yourself, right, you need to create the environment, right? So you put up the colors. You may deal with a certain smell, right? A certain fragrance that a spirit may like, right? So you'll take this fragrance, you'll wear it, but you only wear it for spiritual purposes. Otherwise, it'll lose its potency when it comes to what you're trying to do. Like, for instance, let's say you want to deal with
is that like feng shui? Is that what they call it? Like,
correct. Yeah, feng shui.
Go ahead, say it again.
Feng shui has a similar concept.
See? Like you organize like different things around the house to have different energy around the home and whatnot.
Correct. You see, when you put up your shrines, a person who is dealing with, like, for instance, a priesthood initiation or a priesthood tradition, they may divine and ask where the spirit may want the shrine at. You see, because you may put the shrine in some parts in your house, but the energy will not be as efficient or as effective as if you was to do divination and let the spirit guide you in where to put the shrine.
Got you. So what is the difference between hoodoo, voodoo, Ifa? Is it just like it's just different parts of Africa, different parts of the Caribbean, different parts of Latin America or South America and in the United States? Or is it just branches? So voodoo, is it branches of just one big tree and root, or what is it?
Well, there's some similarities and there's also variants. For instance, you have voodoo or Voodoo, right? So that originates, much of it comes from Benin. So it comes from that part of West Africa and Benin and Dahomey and so forth. And their tradition, they have Maulisa, or they may have the variations of beings they call voodoos. But voodoo or voodoo means spirit, right? It can also mean spirit of God or divine spirit, depending on how you look at it. Down in Louisiana, even though some people consider voodoo to be derogatory because they see it as generic and Hollywood-like, but it still comes from the same meaning as far as spirit. So voodoo is spirit, okay? And then you have, when you go into, I talked about hoodoo having its origin in the Congo. And then there's Ifa. Well, here's the thing about Ifa. Ifa is a system that goes along with, like, for instance, the Yoruba. That's the higher aspect of their Isheshe tradition. Today, they call it Isheshe, meaning tradition, right? But in the diaspora, it's a part of Lecumi, right? And it's also, yes, Santeria also recognizes the Babalao who practice Ifa. But the thing about it, though, is that you have Ifa and you have the Orisha. But both of these are systems that may stem from one tradition. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So the higher aspect of the Orisha system of the Yoruba is Ifa. but the higher aspect of the Voodoo and the Fan, you know, and Dahomey is Fa. It's just like Ifa, it's the same system now, but you know, Ifa of the Yoruba, they tend to put a lot more emphasis on Orumila as the prophet of Ifa. You see, now when you get to Fa, they speak about the 16-eyed God. These 16 eyes, just like Ifa, these 16 eyes deal with the 16 patterns of divination that breaks down into 256 different combinations. And in these 256 different combinations, each and every one of them have stories, remedies, songs, prayers, and incantations to summon the force or the deity that you would like to work with, that you would like to invoke or evoke, and however you're supposed to work with this particular force. And that's the Babalao in the Ifa tradition of the Yoruba. But in the Fan tradition, is you have the Bokor or the Bokonan. It's the
Yeah,
same thing.
that's awesome. You know, me, I'm just a little initiate, you know, who runs around and, you know, lightweight scholar when it comes to the Ifa. I just look at it, there's many different languages to speak to the spirit that's within. And these are all different ways to do it. Carmelita said this is an awesome discussion. I agree. I concur. Jermaine, he should be on here. He said, y'all really going down the windy road tonight. Yes, we are. You know what I'm saying? So it's a great way to start off Black History Month to talk about this, because for me, Black means the source. Black means melanin. Black means carbon. Where there is melanin, there is carbon. Where is carbon, there is life. So it's very important we talk about where the source of life on the planet Earth started. And we're talking about African spiritual systems. Maybe we'll get to if we should be calling ourselves Africa or not in that whole debate too when it comes to African spiritual systems. But I wanted to move a little bit further down, because when we start talking about hoodoo, voodoo, and Ifa, now based on what I've read, I heard I have a book on hoodoo. Hoodoo is, you know, what I read, my understanding from what I read, it came to be like a combination of the many different practices. But I don't know if that's, you know, that's just what I read in the book. I just heard that it becomes like, you know, a combination of the many different languages that came out of Ifa and voodoo and Lecumi and all the, I don't know if that's your understanding of it, not, or one understanding.
Okay. Well, I think your location has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, you know, down in New Orleans, you know, they have a tendency to everything is kind of merged into one another, right?
Yeah.
You know, in New Orleans voodoo, you know, there's the magic of voodoo. It's not necessarily initiatory, but then there's the Haitian voodoo, and it's much more structured. You see,
right. And that makes sense because the South or New Orleans became one of the mini hubs, like, you know what I'm saying, like the capital hub of where a lot of, you know, Africans from, you know, the Caribbean and all different parts of the Caribbean that came from all different parts of West Africa and Central Africa, they came with their different languages and different ways to, you know what I'm saying, celebrate the spirit and also celebrate the earth. You know what I'm saying? So it makes sense that it would, you know, it will be some gumbo.
Yes, indeed. And you know, Louisiana gumbo tastes good too.
Yeah. So you know, and some of this stuff I'm just gonna lob it up to you because I know the answer, and some of them I don't know the answer. What's the difference between all these African spiritual systems that we went through and paganism? Because you talk to a lot of Christians and you talk to a lot of Muslims and you talk to a lot of Jews. They'd be like, that's paganism. Don't be doing that stuff. So what is the difference from all these African spiritual systems that sound so rich, you know what I'm saying, and knowledge and spirit? Why are they calling it paganism? What does paganism mean, and why does it seem like it's bad, like erecting a tree or, you know, just different things, idols that you worship? What is paganism, Khepra?
Okay. Well, paganism comes from word, I think, pagos, something like that. You know, the same word where you get pageant, where they would do rituals out in the woods, out in the forest, away from the city. So the same thing as heathen. It basically means the same thing. And that was just their way of saying that these practices were not considered civilized practices because these systems were usually identified with things practiced out in the country. So that's where the word the pagan is for those who practice things that are from the country. Or you might could just say and just keep it very simple. A lot of people in the Abrahamic tradition simply believe that anything else that's not considered a religion of the book is paganism.
Yeah,
You
and it
see?
usually has a bad connotation.
Yes, it does, because a lot of people have been taught to demonize what they do not understand. The
Yeah.
idea of a tree, for instance, you go throughout African tradition and you'll see that trees are very important, very venerated, you know. So, I mean, when people tell me about, oh, well, a Christmas tree is evil and it's pagan, that doesn't bother me because, first of all, I have no rules and regulations that tell me in my tradition, or talk against it. Whether or not it's European, it's of no consequence because, well, it's no sin in my tradition having a tree, But when you look a little bit deeper, without Ifa, without the tree, you can't practice Ifa. Without hoodoo, without the tree, you can't practice hoodoo. Why? Because it's all dealing with root work. You have to connect with the trees. You got to get barks. You got to get leaves. You got to get roots. Medicine is in the trees. At the same time, all the way in primordial time, they were the oldest beings venerated in the form of trees. So they would leave offerings at the foot of trees. So when you're dealing with, like, for instance, your Christmas celebration, and the church is talking about how evil having a Christmas tree is, in African tradition, they left offerings at the feet of, they still leave offerings at the feet of trees. And today, you're still understand like the Iroko tree is a sacred tree, is connected to the elders of the night and the ancestors. You will leave objects by the tree or food by the tree to feed the ancestors. But trees are also considered to be bridges to the ancestors, representing the roots that's going deep into the earth where the ancestors are buried and their branches reaching out to the heavens. So trees are very significant.
So that's why we have a Christmas tree.
Yes, that's where it comes from.
What's crazy, for lack of a better term, is my definition of paganism, and I tell people this all the time, and it's usually a Christian. It just means the celebration of the earth. It's just very simple. It's
Yes.
celebrating the earth. And keeping that in mind, then what is the difference between witchcraft, the African spiritual systems that you talked about, and paganism? Are they all connected? Are they the same? When someone says, "Oh, that's not voodoo, that's witchcraft."
Well, the thing about it is witchcraft. Now, that actually comes from an indigenous European. That's the indigenous European spirituality, right? So, more the new agey version of it, they call it Wicca and so forth. That's kind of more of a recent practice that were developed in modern time. But the word witch comes from the word Wicca and Wicca. One is male and one is female, right? And eventually the male evolved into what they call the warlock. But basically, that's the European indigenous system. That's all that is. So when the church came into power, they said, we got to wipe these traditions out. You guys, we need you guys in the church, and we need you guys doing our bidding. And if you don't, we're going to kill you. So in the process, they actually murdered over like 60,000 women, accusing these women of being witches, when all they were doing was preserving the ancient ways of their ancestors, including working with herbs, working with incantation, and speaking with the ancestors, and working with all that which you find in the forest. But they came up with this idea that those who practice these traditions were worshiping the devil, and they even accused these women of having sex with the devil. And a lot of times, all she had to do is have a birthmark, and they consider that to be a mark of the devil. So their fear of women had a lot to do with women's ability to go into trance states. Okay? So when we talk about this, and this is very important because I also want to talk about the fact that, because this leads to something else, the ability to go into trance states where you can alter your consciousness is looked upon as deadly. It's dangerous because you. What's that?
I'm talking about like movies like The Exorcist. You know what I'm saying? They be saying people are
Uh-huh.
possessed. You know?
Right, right. And I kind of stay away from that word. Of course, some people may call it transpossession and so forth. I
Right.
stay away from that word because of the fact that people look at it like some demon that, attaching itself to some girl and her head spinning around in circles. And that's not what this is. What it is that you're awakening and opening of yourself to a frequency of a spirit in which you channel the frequency of the spirit. The spirit speaks through you. And a lot of times the spirit will have a message for the community. Okay. Now, Black people are said to be a very emotional people. But what are emotions other than trance states? You see, what it is that they have used us against ourselves by teaching us or not allowing us to let the elders train us on how to deal with these trance states.
Yeah.
As a result, we become self-destructive. And that's why initiation and teachings of the elders was so important.
Yeah. That's why music and lyrics is important, is important. And it all plays a tool. I don't think you can, it's not just binary. Like some people's like, well, if we just change the lyrics, and the music, and then we can operate at a higher vibration and frequency because the music is a lower fret. Yeah, but we also have to compete with the conditions that we live in. Also, everything has to play a role. Because the one thing I like about African spiritual systems is when you go to a brother or sister's home who practices African spiritual systems, they'll have a shrine. And what they're doing is, you might say it's spooky, or you're putting some kind of energy into some idol, some kind of statue and stuff like that. But what it is, it doesn't come without some kind of organization and some kind of plans to accomplish some kind of goals in your life. And it usually comes with communicating and congregating with people with like minds, and also being kind to each other.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It all works with changing the conditions in which you live.
Correct.
And how you love each other, and also how you heal. And that is one of the things that really, really scared the colonizer, is because we really didn't need them.
Exactly.
They needed us to heal. Like, how in the world are they using the plants and herbs from the ground to heal their hurt, to create medicine? Because if you go and you really study it, if you know any kind of science, your vitamins, all your pharmaceutical drugs, they're just commercial manufacturers of what we were doing with Earth. That's all it is. They they're either mimicking what we get from the Earth, or they're just a mass production of, planet Earth. Cutting out fair trade, for example. I'm dropping little breadcrumbs. Go research it. Okay.
Indeed.
So they're learning from us. And I've always noticed throughout history, see me, anytime a melanin deficient person or a white person or a European, however you want to say it, they go study under our initiation rites, and they go back to teach the people, like, hey, this is what the ancestors taught us before we look like this. And they're telling us that we didn't always look like this. You know what I mean? We were darker people, and we learned from the Earth. Their life would be threatened, if not killed.
Yeah.
They talk about Plato, Socrates, how they went back and they taught them. They were like, first of all, I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy.
Right.
And the higher ups, they were just gaslighting them. They knew what the heck he was talking about, but he was incredibly dangerous because he was teaching the people to be self-sufficient.
Yep. Indeed.
And then after a while, they were like, until we can gain ownership of this information and this knowledge, we're going to discredit them. But all the great people in Greek and Roman history that they refer to, I've been to the Louvre. I've been to all their museums, the British Museum, Pythagoras, Herodotus, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. A lot of them, if not all of them, studied in Egypt or Africa.
Yes, they did.
And then they came back and was like, hey, hold on. you teaching, women how to, and that speaks volumes about the Europeans' relationship with the earth if they're willing to kill their own women for just studying the earth and healing them because they're that much of a threat. So when I say that Europeans' cultural values or melanin deficient people's cultural values are different based on their relationship to the sun and the earth, people don't want to believe me. But the truth is in the pudding, And so when they start calling women witches and stuff like that, it's like for just healing yourself, you know what I'm saying, and having autonomy over their bodies, it makes you wonder. And it makes you wonder how much we adopt as people, when we're learning from them and we see their spiritual systems, the European spiritual systems, as the higher standard of gold and how to get closer to God in ourselves, when all we are is getting closer to a mystery rather than truth. So why are African spiritual systems good for the Black community? Why?
Well, you bring up an important point about as far as the recognition of the power of the woman as well, you see, because you see African spiritual systems, they recognize they're not just he this, he that, there's a female aspect as well as a male aspect, you see. In fact, although Dumare is both female as well as male, okay, and then it's Mawulisa. The female aspect of Mawulisa is Mawu, the male is Lisa, right? And the eyes of Mawulisa is the sun and the moon, indicating that there's a recognition of this polarity, but not just a polarity as opposition, but a dual harmony.
That's why we see a lot of androgynous beings, in different religions, you know what I'm saying? You said male and female. This is what I be trying to explain to people. If you study Ifa and you study a lot of this stuff, it actually answers a lot of questions that you have about how you're confused about how Europeans taught us how to value ourselves and see each other, as human beings and also as spiritual beings. But continue.
So, it brings this type of balance because not only are you looking at the respect of the sacred feminine as well as the masculine, but there's a proverb in one of the Odu of Ifa called Obara Meji, where it says that both hands wash the other, right? The right hand washes the left hand and so forth, and both hands wash the face. But when we use both hands, right, you're also activating both brain hemispheres, which means that you are balanced. So these African systems were very holistic. I believe earlier I saw where Carmelita had mentioned Sufism and Kabbalah and so forth. And these systems are very similar because it's talking about reaching a state that's beyond. When you go beyond duality, then there is no differentiation, and you're tapping into that undifferentiated aspect of source to be the embodiment of this intelligence and to be able to express it in your unique way.
Yeah. And the European learned throughout history, the colonizer learned throughout history, allowing us to celebrate the earth, which we have defined as paganism, allowing us to heal ourselves through the earth, find divinity through the spirit within, the voodoo, we were able to overthrow them.
Yes.
And and if you talk to anyone or if you read any in-depth research about Haiti and just go further beneath just saying, it's about Toussaint Overture and it's about, Dessalines. No, go deeper. Go deeper to what they were actually studying and recognizing as the supreme force within, and you'll find out it was voodoo.
That's
how they overthrew the French. It was through voodoo. Without voodoo, they would not have done that. I'm positive.
And you're correct, because they even have their own form of, should you say, indigenous warfare, where they can find a part of you and they can break down your DNA and everything else, and then come up with a powder that will only affect you. So other people may walk on the porch and they will not get affected, but you walk on it and it messes you up. You'll find worms in your stomach and everything else.
No, I've heard of some stuff, man. I've heard some stuff they blow in your face, and you will do whatever someone tells you to do.
Yes.
And we know it's possible. This ain't no spooky stuff. We know it's possible. There's drugs like that now.
Indeed.
There's also hypnotism.
Indeed.
You know what I mean? So it's like, these are all the things that they told us that we couldn't study anymore, so they could steal it and they could claim it for themselves.
Exactly.
And they were doing a lot of stuff, man. They were poisoning a lot of people, you know what I'm saying, with the earth. And you know, another thing they were doing was to tap into the energy. I know you know this too. They were training the animals.
Yes.
They were training animals to be used, you know what I'm saying, as weapons as they battled the colonizer. And we know the best example is what every military leader follows is Hannibal. Hannibal trained the elephants.
Yes, he did.
But that's why I say that it was very pluralistic. It's like you might study something culturally, but that has nothing to do with your relationship to the earth. That's the medicine and the food you eat, and that might be different than your religion or your spiritual system.
Right. And something I'd like to point out too.
It's all connected together.
That's true.
There's no either or. It's either or and that's one thing.
Either or and.
Yeah, and that's one thing that the European or the colonizer had to shut down, because they would not be successful in all their pursuits if we were connecting everything.
Correct. Yes, and that's the thing. A lot of the Abrahamic traditions teach you about the oneness of God, but indigenous African spiritual systems teach you about the allness of God. You see? So, that's it. We don't just talk about oneness. We talk about allness. Now, you mentioned earlier about the connection with the earth, which is very important. In the tradition of Isheshe, Ifa, and Lecumi, there's the concept called Ewa Puele. Ewa Puele, it means, they break it down to mean balanced character. But it also means, it breaks down, it's an Elysian, it breaks down to mean, I have come to greet the earth. You see? So the traditions within West Africa and Central Africa are very earth-based traditions. So there's no Orisha practice if you get rid of working with herbs and plants. Okay, you need these herbs and plants. You need to working with the soils and dirts. And you get into Voodoo tradition, they tell you about getting the various dirts from different areas that you're going to utilize in your rituals, even in your healing. Now, if you understand that the universe is holographic in nature, then we understand that every part contains the whole. And what we're looking at.
You said the earth is holographic in nature?
The whole universe, because what it is.
What does that mean? A holograph, we know it from like watching these clips of the holograph of Tupac on stage after he's dead. So holograph kind of means fake to some people. So what does holographic in nature mean, Khepra?
So if you take a hologram and you break it into pieces, you'll take the piece of the hologram and it contains the whole hologram. It contains the whole image. So that's what we mean as far as holographic in nature, because the universe is also made up of fractals, which are self-similar parts that make up the whole. Example, the universe would be considered to be a person, and we're considered to be the miniaturizations of that person. But then your body is made up of billions of tiny life forms called cells. You see? So self-similar parts, where every part contains the whole. That is what our universe, how our universe is consistent.
That's why when people say, is there life on other planets and this, that, and the third, I'm like, just slow down and break it down. Look at the vast universe within you. Just start there. And that's the universe. That's that universe. When you look up all around, just look at the universe within inside you, how vast it is, and how stuff is just working on its own, has its own intelligence. That's exactly how the universe is working. Of course, there's life on other planets.
Ashe. And that's exactly what the ancestors were able to do. They were able to go within interstellar travel. They went to inner space because they understood as above, so below, as within, so without. You know, I remember a brother, you remember Brother Patrick Kendrick from back in the day. I remember him sharing this with me. He said, when you're feeling down and out, the best place to go is in and up. So the key to even what people call ascension is going inward.
Now I got to ask you this question because I know some people are thinking about this. There have been some conversations. I don't remember the name off. I know I think they call it frog venom is one of them. They also have some other drugs that they say that you can tap in to this supreme force that kind of links back to this relationship to the planet Earth, studying and recognizing, celebrating the Earth and using the Earth to tap into, as you would say, astral portals. Do you think the study and the celebration and the practicing of African spiritual systems and indigenous, spiritual systems encourages like drug use, like microdosing? A lot of people are microdosing mushrooms now.
Yeah.
They call it DMT, part and self, DMT. There's another one that they take that they say causes intense vomiting. Will Smith talks about how you got to have a practitioners all around you and a circle and a support group. I forget what it's called. Someone put it in the comments. I know y'all know what it is. It's similar to DMT, but to tap into that subconsciousness and that astral plane, there is the use of using the earth as a drug. Do you think like indigenous spiritual systems encourage that?
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, what we're seeing, all the drug use that we have is basically when they have taken that and they've made it artificial. You see, so a lot of drugs that you see out in the street and everything else, and designer drugs, they were at one point in time they derived from natural things. Even cocaine derived from the plant, but it's just been processed. You see what I mean? You know, someone mentioned ayahuasca.
There
Well,
it is. That's the one I'm talking about. Thank you, Watson, Rob. That's the one that Will Smith said he did, and said it took him to a whole different level. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So the use of plants and the using plants to get into trance states is common in African traditions as well. You know, but the thing about it, like I said, you know, you'll even find some of your Somali brothers and sisters who may be chewing on the chat, which is like the grass stems and everything else. It puts them in somewhat of a euphoric, peaceful state. But there's also hallucinogens and everything else to help you get into that other state. But some of these things are secrets. Like, for instance, when they put you in that state, when they put you in a trance for 3 days and then they revive you, that's a practice that is still found in West Africa among the people that do voodoo.
You said 3 days?
Yes.
Someone rose after 3 days. Someone rose after 3 days. I think
they sure did. They sure did. You see what I mean? Now,
Jesus rose after 3 days. Yeah.
Come on. Because the science of resurrection was definitely connected with that. You see what I mean? So if you're looking into the secrets and the mysteries, well, they use herbs and everything else to put you in that trance state. Even in the concept of making zombies in Haiti, that's a real thing.
It is a real thing. Zombies is an actual term. It's an actual term in voodoo. Yes.
Right. And it'll take certain herbs, and it also takes something from the puffer fish. And they would utilize that and make a concoction, and they'll get that into the person's system. And then they'll put this person in this state where they cannot do anything on their own free will. You see, they had to literally outlaw making zombies in Haiti because they were doing this quite a bit.
What's the advantage or benefit of someone being in that zombie state through these herbs and these medicines from the earth?
Well, unfortunately, there's the left hand and there's the right hand. We do not encourage people to deal with things in a negative way. But in Haiti, they're also dealing with spirituality from a place of warfare too. You see what I mean? So making somebody a slave and whatnot, that's what they were doing, that taking away their free will. That's what that was. They'll kill off like part of the left brain and put them in a situation where they'll take orders and then they have them work.
The colonizers were doing that, or the people were doing that towards each other, or both?
These were people doing that towards each other. These were the people doing that towards each other. You see? So there's the positive aspect and there's the negative aspect. But one of the things that I also want to talk about, because I don't want people to get caught up on that, be like, oh, well, you guys go around making zombies. No. That was only a group of sorcerers or a certain type of sorcerer that would do that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You
so
know.
We've come. We gotta have a to be continued. We gotta have you back on the show. We do a plan of action, you know, at the end of every show. So I want to ask you, the plan of action I'm gonna use it in the form of this. It's like, how can we use African spiritual systems, you know, to improve, you know, your life? How can someone use African spiritual systems to improve themselves?
Good question. Beautiful question. Well, first of all, in a tradition of Fa or Ifa, in Voodoo and Orisha or whatever, they all have their systems of divination. You see? Now, according to like these traditions, you came here and you came here with a mission that you had when you were in the realm of the ancestors, but you forgot that mission. So divination helps you to remember by reminding you what it is that you were meant to do here. But things happen where you were thrown off track. First of all, your first traumatic experience was being born and emerging from the womb. That's when you first forgot, you see. But then as you go in through life, you go through other traumas and things that further take you off where you're supposed to be. So what happens is that people end up becoming successful one thing, but it's like they built their ladder on the wrong house, you see? So in other words, they're unfulfilled because they're not doing what it is that they're supposed to do. When you get an Ifa divination, right? Or you work in Logun, which is the system of divination of the Orishas and so forth, they're able to tell you who your spirit guides are, that is your Orishas, right? And what your purpose is and what's taking you off course, and what you can do to get back on course. What are the rituals and the rites that you need to do to get you back on course? But sometimes they'll tell you that, hey, you know, it may not always be something where you could just go and give some fruit or even give a chicken to a deity. Sometimes the sacrifice may be simply you getting some therapy.
Yeah. You know what? My plan of action is, see, this is why I like building with Khepra, because he go real deep. I'm gonna keep it real simple. How you use African spiritual systems to add on to what he said to improve yourself. Talk to a brother like him. Find out what kind of fruits, what kind of foods that you can eat, what from the earth can heal you. That's a great place to start. Tell him what your trauma is. Talk to there's a lot of priests and priestesses and sorry, I don't know if I'm saying it right, pardon self, in Seattle, in your community. Just look them up, man. Start asking the right questions.
I say
instead of trying to demonize people, which makes, you know, people who study Ifa and Voodoo go kind of underground, because, you know, once we start making stuff known and you know what I know, it makes you a target. You know, so start asking the right question. Hey man, anyone study Ifa, or like what I should be eating and the type of plants?
Correct.
Because I guarantee you, check this out. You take any of this pop culture trends that they come with vitamins and stuff that you're supposed to be doing, like fasting and all that. It came from African spiritual systems. It really did. It really did. Fasting's a part of it. How you use like turmeric, all this stuff that you're using, zinc, all this melatonin and all this, your relationship to the sun, you know, it all came from, you know, indigenous people studying the earth. So
indeed,
tell somebody, you know, like Khepra, and say, man, I'm going through this. Can you teach me? Can you teach me? of how to remedy this. And you can, and correct me if I'm wrong. They ain't got to go fully in with the whole, what do you call it, a divination?
Mm-hmm.
Call it.
Right. Yes.
He,
You know.
yeah, Brother Khepra been building with me for a minute, and he's like, "Well, I'm just gonna give you a little bit of what you need." You know, sometimes people are so scared to portray Christianity or Judaism or Islam or whatever they're studying. They think that they can't go over to African spiritual systems, learn a little bit, and take it back and improve their lives. You know, so they can keep coming back.
Indeed. Indeed. And you know what's interesting is even in Africa, you know, preachers and imams go to the priest to ask where to build their churches and their masjids.
Mm-hmm.
You see? So one of the things that's interesting right now is you know, a lot of people are starting to get more into indigenous spiritual systems. They're going and they're reading the books from Barnes and Noble. But you
Yeah.
know, and I'm not here to diss people that do that, but what I would say that if you want to have a legitimate connection with the spiritual system, then you'll speak to a priest or one who can take you through initiation if that's the path that you're interested in. Now, not everybody may need necessarily to get initiated, okay? But for those who are interested in a particular path, it's good to speak with a priest who has went through the training and things of that nature. You know, I wouldn't recommend people do some of the things that they hear about the priest doing without having the proper training. Now,
I've read several books. Sorry to cut you off. I've read several books on Yoruba and Ifa and Voodoo. They say exactly what you just now said. Just be careful of who you study underneath, because some people will be trying to charge people money and all this stuff and all this other things that be going on. But we tell the same people in the nation of gods and earths, man, yeah, you can go on the internet and learn your degrees, but it's best to get you an enlightener so they can teach you and build that relationship. So speaking of building that relationship, come on, man, how can they build a relationship with you? What you got going on, man, brother? I heard you got a book coming out. I heard that you sharing your light. You bringing a torch to the darkness, man. Tell us what you got going on, brother. Peace.
Peace. So right now I'm working on a book called Solarization, Pathway to Ascension, but I was speaking about how we work with the ancestral forces and also breathing meditations and working with herbs to reawaken and raise our life force. You see what I mean? So it's called the Pathway to Ascension, but we're talking about the pathway being an inner journey, you see, like I mentioned earlier. So that's one of my projects that I'm working on. Also, you know, I'm looking for to have, or once again, start back up the Sunday gatherings for those who are interested in working with the ancestors, where they'll be learning songs. They'll also be learning how to communicate with the ancestors and so forth. You see, so the ancestors is the foundation of African traditions. Most of them, you have to go to the ancestors if you want to develop the spiritual power to do the things in which you want to do, including work with other spiritual beings like Orishas. You can reach me. If you're interested, they can reach me at Khepra.Ptah at gmail.com. That's KHEPRA.PTAH. And they can also text me if they have questions and if they'd like to set up a time or set an appointment for a consultation. That is 206-960-7999. That way for 206 960
560
960
960. Okay.
7999.
Okay. It's a good ending. Okay. And let them know what your email it is again one more time.
Okay. So it's my name, Khepra.Ptah. That's KHEPRA.PTAH at gmail.com. Now, also, if you're interested in other things in which I'll be sharing, you can also find me on YouTube under the same name, Khepra Ptah, KHEPRA Ptah.
Okay. I'll have to put that into the I'll put that in the I'll put that in the chat. Um your YouTube and all that and stuff like that. But it's been great. We're gonna have to connect again very, very soon, man. Very, very soon, within the next week or so, because there's so much things I want to go over. I want to go over some people was like, man, why black people always studying this Africa stuff, man? We ain't even from Africa. We were already here. We didn't get to that because I wanted to talk about the people were like, man, we weren't already here. And I'm like, if we were already here and we ain't from Africa, then why are they doing the same thing we doing over at Africa?
Yeah.
Doing over here. So it's like,
yeah.
So we get into that, man. But I love you, brother. You look the same as you did when you were younger, man. We both keeping our youth, and that's because we are studying African spiritual systems and we're trusting with the that spirit, that life force within us, and we're not relying on, what I'm saying, any our oppressors value system to take care of ourselves for the most part. That's definitely a plan B or C, but the plan A is to rely on what our ancestors has taught us. So in the spirit of Black History Month celebration, thank y'all. Be on the lookout. February 11th, 5 p.m. Hiawatha Lofts. We're having a Black History Month celebration with the Griot Party Experience. Inbox me if you want some. First 5 people is going to get tickets, but we got spoken word, we got food, we got drink, we got a live DJ with DJ CB4, we got networking, we got vendors. So February 11th, Hiawatha Lofts, 5 p.m. Come check us out with the Black History Month celebration. Peace, y'all. We out.
Peace.
Peace.